Jack shuffled down the cracked sidewalk, his shoulders hunched against the cold bite of the evening air. The streets of the city, cloaked in the dull glow of streetlights, were a maze of shadows and distant noises. At 18, Jack should have been thinking about college, friends, and future plans. Instead, his thoughts were a chaotic whirlpool of memories and pain. He was a young black man, his face etched with lines of fatigue and his eyes reflecting a depth of sorrow that belied his age. Abandonment had come early. His family, fractured by poverty and substance abuse, had left him to fend for himself. The emotional scars of childhood abuse were deep and raw, wounds that never truly healed but festered and bled, leading him down a path of self-destruction. Jack's descent into substance abuse had been gradual, almost insidious. It started with small escapes, occasional drinks, a few pills here and there. But the temporary relief they provided was intoxicating, and soon he found himself trapped in a cycle of addiction. The drugs numbed the pain, quieted the screams of his past, but they also eroded his sense of self. The city was unforgiving. Nights were the worst, the cold seeping into his bones as he huddled in alleyways or under overpasses. Food was a constant worry, the gnawing hunger a relentless companion. Jack quickly learned the harsh realities of homelessness. People avoided him, their eyes sliding past as if he didn't exist. He was an invisible man in a world that refused to see him. On his first night, truly out on the streets, Jack found himself near a park, the distant sounds of laughter and conversation taunting him. He watched from the shadows as families enjoyed their evening, children running and playing, oblivious to the harshness of life. He managed to find a bench, cold and unwelcoming, and curled up, pulling his thin jacket tighter around him. Sleep was fitful, broken by the chill and the constant fear of being discovered and chased away. In the early hours, he was roused by a policeman, a flashlight shining harshly in his face. "Can't sleep here," the officer said, his tone devoid of empathy. Jack nodded, too tired and cold to argue, and stumbled away, the night pressing in around him. Days bled into weeks, each one a mirror of the last. He scavenged for food, relying on the kindness of strangers or the discarded remnants of the city's more fortunate. He learned which shelters were the safest and which corners to avoid. Along the way, he met others like him, lost souls navigating the same harsh landscape. There was Maria, an older woman who had been on the streets for years. She taught him how to find the best spots for food and shelter, sharing her own tragic story of loss. Then there was Leo, a young man not much older than Jack, who had fallen from a promising future into the depths of addiction. They shared their stories over meager meals, finding solace in the fact that they were not entirely alone in their suffering. Jack's days blurred into a monotonous cycle of survival. Each morning he woke up with the sunrise, the chill of the night still clinging to his bones. His first task was always the same, finding something to eat. The hunger was a constant, gnawing presence that never left him. Jack moved through the city with practiced efficiency, scanning trash bins and alleys for discarded food. Sometimes, if he was lucky, he found half-eaten sandwiches or pieces of fruit that had been tossed aside. On better days, he might stumble upon a bakery that was generous with its day-old bread. Finding a safe place to sleep was another daily challenge. Jack had learned to be cautious, avoiding areas where other homeless individuals congregated. Crowded spots meant competition and potential danger. He preferred quiet corners of parks or tucked-away alleyways where he could rest without fear of being disturbed. The law was a constant threat. Jack had become adept at evading the police, knowing that a single night spent in a shelter might lead to questions he wasn't ready to answer. The humiliation of being caught, The cold metal of the handcuffs and the sterile, uncaring environment of the holding cell were experiences he never wanted to repeat. One evening, as the sky turned a dusky purple, Jack found himself standing outside a small grocery store. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, making his stomach rumble. He had managed to scrounge together a few coins that day, but it wasn't enough for a meal. Desperation gnawed at him, and he knew he had to take a risk. Jack slipped inside the store, his eyes darting around nervously. The warm lights and the sound of soft music were a stark contrast to the harsh reality outside. He moved quickly, his fingers brushing against the loaves of bread on the shelf. His heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed one and tucked it under his jacket. As he turned to leave, a clerk spotted him. "Hey, stop right there!" the man shouted, his voice filled with authority. Jack froze, fear gripping him. He tried to make a run for it, but the clerk was faster, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him back. The bread fell to the floor, and Jack felt a surge of shame and panic. "Please, I was just hungry," Jack pleaded, his voice trembling. The clerk's grip tightened. "That's no excuse for stealing," he said harshly. "You're coming with me." Jack was led to the back of the store, his mind racing. He knew the police would be called, and he dreaded what would come next. When the officers arrived, they placed him in handcuffs and led him to the patrol car. The familiar feeling of metal around his wrists brought back a flood of unwanted memories. At the police station, Jack was placed in a holding cell. The cold, grey walls felt suffocating, and the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant. He could hear the muffled conversations of the officers outside, their voices blending into a monotonous hum. Jack sat on the hard bench, his mind filled with regret and despair. The next morning, Jack was brought before a judge. The courtroom was intimidating with its high ceilings and solemn atmosphere. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, listened to Jack's story with a measured detachment. "Young man, I understand that you are in a difficult situation," the judge said, his voice firm but not unkind. "However, stealing is not the answer. You need help, and I'm going to make sure you get it." Jack was sentenced to community service and probation. The judge's words lingered in his mind as he was led out of the courtroom. He felt a deep sense of shame, but also a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the push he needed to turn his life around. The impact of the arrest weighed heavily on Jack. He felt even more isolated and desperate than before. The streets seemed colder, the nights longer. He struggled to maintain his sense of self-worth, constantly battling the voices in his head that told him he was worthless. Despite the hardships, Jack refused to give up. He continued to search for food, find safe places to sleep, and avoid the law. Jack sat on the busy sidewalk, holding his hungry sign, the world moving past him in a blur of indifference. Across the street, a woman in her mid-30s walked briskly, her two young daughters in tow. Dawn had an air of purpose about her. Her daughters, bright-eyed and curious, tugged at her hands, chattering away. Dawn's gaze fell on Jack, and she slowed her pace, her expression shifting from hurried focus to thoughtful concern. "Mommy, what's he doing?" one of the girls asked, pointing at Jack. Dawn stopped, her eyes meeting Jack's. She led her daughters across the street, straight towards him. Jack, accustomed to being ignored, was caught off guard by the directness of her gaze. "You're hungry?" Dawn asked, her voice warm and genuine. "Why don't you come eat with us?" Jack blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Really? Are you sure?" he stammered. "Yes," Dawn replied firmly. "Come on, let's get you something to eat." Jack hesitated. But the sincerity in Dawn's eyes and the innocent curiosity of her daughters melted his resistance. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the stares from passers-by. Dawn's daughters smiled at him, their openness a stark contrast to the usual guarded looks he received. The walk to the restaurant was surreal. Dawn's daughters, Emily and Sophie, peppered Jack with questions. "What's your name? How old are you? Do you like pancakes?" Their innocent chatter was disarming, and Jack found himself answering them with a tentative smile. "I'm Jack," he said. "I'm 20, and yeah, I like pancakes." Emily grinned. "Me too. Mummy, can we have pancakes?" Dawn chuckled. "We'll see what they have when we get there." As they approached the restaurant, Jack's apprehension grew. He wasn't used to such kindness, and part of him feared it was too good to be true. But Dawn's steady presence and her daughters' cheerful voices eased his anxiety. They entered the warm, inviting space, the contrast to the cold street outside striking. They sat at a booth near the window. Jack felt out of place, his ragged clothes and unkempt appearance stark against the clean, cozy interior. Dawn didn't seem to notice or care. She handed him a menu, her smile encouraging. "Order whatever you like," she said. Jack scanned the menu, his stomach growling. Maybe just some eggs and toast," he mumbled. "Nonsense," Dawn said. "Get a full breakfast. You need it." Reluctantly, Jack ordered pancakes, eggs, and bacon. Dawn sat across from Jack, her gaze steady and warm. The restaurant hummed with the quiet chatter of morning patrons, the clinking of dishes, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unused to the attention. Dawn's daughters, Emily and Sophie, had settled into their meals, their occasional giggles punctuating the air. "Tell me more about yourself, Jack," Dawn said, her voice gentle but insistent. Jack hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. "There's not much to tell," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Dawn leaned in slightly, her expression unwavering. "I'd like to hear it if you're willing to share." Taking a deep breath, Jack began to speak, his words halting at first. "I grew up in a small town. My mum, she wasn't around much. Dad left when I was a kid. Spent most of my time trying to stay out of trouble." He paused, glancing at Dawn to gauge her reaction. She nodded, encouraging him to continue. "Go on." Jack swallowed hard, the memories bitter on his tongue. "When I was 15, something happened. Something bad. After that, everything fell apart. I tried to cope, but I ended up on the streets." Dawn's eyes softened with understanding. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, Jack." Jack shrugged, trying to brush off the weight of his past. "It is what it is. I made some bad choices, got into drugs. Thought it would help, you know, but it only made things worse." Dawn listened intently, her empathy palpable. "And now? What are you hoping for?" Jack looked down at his hands, the calloused fingers that had seen too much hardship. "I just want a chance to get clean, to find a job, maybe even go back to school someday. I don't know if it's possible, but I want to try." Dawn smiled, a genuine expression of encouragement. "You can do it, Jack. It won't be easy, but you've already shown so much strength just by surviving." Their meals arrived, and Dawn made sure Jack's plate was full. She even ordered a dessert, despite his initial protest. "You deserve a treat," she said firmly, and Jack couldn't help but smile at her insistence. As they ate, the conversation flowed more freely. Jack found himself opening up more than he had in years. Dawn's genuine interest and lack of judgment made it easier to share his story. She spoke about her own life, the challenges of raising two daughters on her own, and the importance of community and support. "I always tell Emily and Sophie that kindness is our greatest strength," Dawn said, glancing fondly at her daughters, who were now engrossed in a coloring book they had brought along. "We never know what someone else is going through, and sometimes a little kindness can make all the difference." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. "You've been more than kind to me today. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Dawn replied. "Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. And if you ever need help, don't hesitate to call." After the meal, Dawn reached into her purse and handed Jack some money and a piece of paper with her phone number on it. "Here, this is for you. Use it for whatever you need, and call me if you're ever in a tight spot." Jack took the paper, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Dawn. Really, thank you." Dawn's eyes met his, full of hope and determination. "You're welcome, Jack. Remember, you're not alone. There are people who care about you, even if you don't see them right now." Jack left the restaurant with a full stomach and a lighter heart. As he walked back to his usual spot on the street, he reflected on the encounter. Dawn's kindness had pierced the veil of his isolation, reminding him of his humanity. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of hope. Sitting down on the sidewalk, Jack looked at the piece of paper with Dawn's number. It wasn't just a number. It was a lifeline, a tangible reminder that someone cared. The significance of Dawn's act of kindness began to sink in. It wasn't just the meal or the money, it was the recognition of his worth, the acknowledgement that he mattered. Dawn's influence had planted a seed of hope in his heart, and he was determined to nurture it, to let it grow and guide him towards a better future. As the city buzzed around him, Jack clung to that hope, feeling for the first time in years that he could find his way back from the darkness. Jack clutched his backpack tightly as he wandered through the bustling city streets, the familiar weight of it providing a small sense of security. Inside was everything he owned. A few pieces of clothing, some personal items, and the most important piece, a scrap of paper with Dawn's phone number. That number had become his lifeline, a symbol of hope that he could reach out for help if things got too tough. But one evening, while Jack was dozing in a secluded corner of a park, his backpack was stolen. He awoke with a start, his heart pounding as he realized what had happened. Frantically, he searched the area, but it was gone. The despair hit him like a tidal wave. Without that number, he felt adrift, the thin thread of hope he had been clinging to now severed. Jack wandered aimlessly, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. The streets felt colder, more hostile. Each step was heavier than the last. He replayed the moment in his mind, cursing himself for letting his guard down. The days that followed were a blur of desperation and self-doubt. He felt the pull of old habits, the temptation to numb the pain with drugs. But Dawn's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to stay strong. One evening, driven by a mix of desperation and determination, Jack found himself standing outside a rehabilitation center. The building was nondescript, its plain facade belying the life-changing work that happened inside. Jack took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He had heard about the center from other homeless individuals who spoke of its programs and the support it offered. Jack walked up to the door, his hand trembling as he reached for the handle. But as he stood there, fear and anxiety began to creep in. What if he wasn't strong enough to go through with it? What if he failed? The doubts gnawed at him, and the more he thought about it, the more overwhelming it became. Unable to push past his fear, Jack turned away, his heart heavy with a mix of shame and regret. He walked aimlessly through the streets, his thoughts a tangled mess. Night fell, and the city took on a different, more threatening persona. The cold bit into his skin, and he searched for a place to hunker down for the night. Finding a sheltered spot under an overpass, Jack settled in, his mind still reeling from the day's events. As he lay there, the familiar itch of withdrawal began to take hold. It started as a gnawing discomfort, growing into a relentless, agonizing need. Jack curled into himself, his body racked with tremors. The urge to seek out a fix was almost unbearable, but something deep inside him fought against it. As the night wore on, Jack's resolve wavered. The pain was excruciating, each wave of withdrawal crashing over him like a relentless tide. He bit down on his lip, drawing blood, trying to distract himself from the overwhelming urge. Dawn's face flashed in his mind, her words a beacon in the darkness. "Remember, you're not alone. There are people who care about you." In that moment, Jack made a decision. He couldn't keep living like this. He couldn't let the fear and doubt control him. He had to fight, not just for himself, but for the hope that Dawn had instilled in him. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, Jack pushed himself up, his body trembling with effort. The next morning, with the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, Jack found himself back at the door of the rehabilitation center. Jack stood at the entrance of the rehab center, a plain brick building with an unassuming facade. The sign read, "Hope Haven, Recovery and Renewal." Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside, feeling a mix of fear and determination. This was his last chance, and he knew it. The intake process was thorough. He was asked to fill out forms, answer questions about his history, and undergo a medical evaluation. The staff was professional, but their eyes carried a kindness he hadn't seen in a long time. "You're in good hands here," the nurse said, handing him a folder with his schedule and information about the program. The first few days were a blur of detoxification. Jack's body rebelled against the absence of the substances it had come to depend on. The physical pain was intense, muscle cramps, nausea, chills, and the emotional toll was even harder. He spent hours in his small, sterile room, feeling as if he were fighting a battle he might not win. During these dark hours, the counselors were his lifeline. They checked on him regularly, offering words of encouragement and ensuring he stayed hydrated and fed. "You're doing great, Jack," one of them said, a tall man named Mike with a calm demeanor. "Just hang in there. It gets easier." The turning point came in a group therapy session. Jack sat in a circle with other participants, each sharing their stories. There was Carla, a single mother trying to regain custody of her children; Tom, a former construction worker who lost everything to gambling; and Maria, a young woman battling an eating disorder. Their honesty was raw and unfiltered, and Jack found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. "I lost everything," he confessed. "My family, my dignity. I thought drugs were the only way to escape the pain, but they just made it worse." The group listened without judgment, offering nods of understanding and murmurs of support. For the first time, Jack felt a sense of camaraderie. He wasn't alone in his struggle. The days turned into weeks, and Jack began to adjust to the routine. Mornings started with meditation and mindfulness exercises, helping him center himself for the challenges ahead. Therapy sessions followed, both individual and group, where he delved into the traumas that had led him down this path. There were workshops on life skills, budgeting, job searching, communication. One afternoon, Mike pulled Jack aside. "I've seen a lot of progress in you," he said. "We think you're ready for the next step. Transitional housing. It'll give you a stable place to stay while you continue your recovery and start looking for work." Jack moved into the transitional housing program a week later. The apartment was small but clean, with a bed, a desk, and a shared kitchen. It was the first time in years he had a place to call his own. The stability was comforting, but it also brought a new set of challenges. He had to learn to build routines, manage his time, and set achievable goals. He started each day with a checklist: make the bed, prepare a healthy breakfast, attend job training sessions. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of his previous life, and the structure gave him a sense of control. Slowly, he began to rebuild his self-esteem. Finding employment proved difficult. Jack faced rejection after rejection. The gaps in his work history and his past addiction a black mark on his applications. But he refused to give up. He attended job fairs, networked with support groups, and kept refining his skills. One day, he received a call from a local grocery store. They were looking for a stock clerk, someone reliable and hard-working. Jack went to the interview, his heart pounding with nervous anticipation. The manager, a gruff but kind man named Mr. Harris, looked over his application and asked a few questions. "You've had a rough patch," Mr. Harris said, eyeing Jack thoughtfully, "but you seem determined to turn things around. I'll give you a chance. Don't let me down." Jack started the following Monday. The work was physically demanding but straightforward. Stocking shelves, organizing inventory, helping customers. Each day he showed up on time, ready to prove himself. The routine of work, coupled with the support from the rehab center, helped solidify his progress. With each paycheck, Jack saved a little money, slowly building a nest egg for the future. Jack's transformation was gradual but profound. He found pride in his work, joy in small daily routines, and a renewed sense of purpose. Jack knew he owed much of his recovery to the support he received along the way. The counselors, the group members, and the kindness of strangers like Dawn had all played a part in his healing. He was determined to give back, to be a beacon of hope for others still lost in the darkness. Jack sat in the small, dimly lit meeting room, surrounded by a circle of chairs. The familiar scent of coffee and the low hum of conversation filled the air. It was his regular support group meeting, a crucial part of his journey towards sobriety. Each week, he gathered with others who shared similar struggles, their stories intertwining in a tapestry of hope and resilience. Outside of the meetings, Jack's days were filled with a steady rhythm of work and self-improvement. He continued his job at the grocery store, taking pride in his reliability and hard work. The routine gave him structure and a sense of accomplishment, small but significant victories that helped him stay on track. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. Temptations lurked around every corner, old habits calling to him in moments of weakness. There were days when the urge to numb the pain with drugs was almost overwhelming. On those days, Jack leaned heavily on the tools he'd learned in rehab: mindfulness exercises, deep breathing, and reaching out to his support network. One particularly rough evening, Jack found himself standing outside a bar, the neon lights flickering enticingly. He could almost taste the alcohol, feel the familiar buzz. But then he thought of Dawn, of the promise he made to her and to himself. With a deep breath, he turned away, dialing Mike's number from the rehab center. "Hey, Mike, it's Jack. I'm struggling tonight," he admitted, his voice shaky. "Hang in there, Jack," Mike replied. "Remember why you're doing this. You've come so far. Don't let one bad night take that away." Jack thanked him, feeling the weight lift slightly. It wasn't easy, but he made it through the night, one small victory at a time. Amidst the ups and downs, Jack found a new sense of purpose. One day, while browsing through pamphlets at the community center, he came across information about an associate's degree program. The idea of going back to school sparked something inside him, a sense of hope and direction. "I want to enroll," he told Mike during their next session. "I need to do this for myself." Mike smiled, pride evident in his eyes. "That's a great idea, Jack. Education can open so many doors. It's a big step, but I believe in you." Jack enrolled in the program, balancing classes with his job. It wasn't easy, but the challenge invigorated him. Each class, each assignment brought a sense of achievement and progress. He was building a future, one lesson at a time. Jack also started to develop new friendships. At the community center, he met people who shared his interests in books and art. They introduced him to new hobbies, like painting and hiking, activities that filled his time with joy and purpose. These connections grounded him, providing a support system that was essential to his recovery. One weekend, Jack joined a hiking group for a trek through a nearby forest. The crisp air and the sound of leaves crunching underfoot were a balm to his soul. As he walked, he chatted with others in the group, sharing stories and laughter. It was a stark contrast to the isolation he had felt on the streets. "Nature has a way of healing," one of the hikers said, smiling at Jack. "It's good to see you out here, finding your path." Jack nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. His journey was far from over, but he was no longer the lost soul he had once been. He was rebuilding his life, piece by piece, with a renewed sense of purpose and direction. As the months passed, Jack's confidence grew. He excelled in his classes, earning high marks and praise from his professors. His work at the grocery store remained steady, and he even received a promotion to shift supervisor, a testament to his dedication and hard work. Jack's road to recovery was filled with challenges, but each step forward brought new opportunities and growth. He was no longer defined by his past mistakes, but by his resilience and determination to build a better future. And with each day, he moved closer to the life he had always dreamed of, a life of stability, purpose, and hope. Jack sat on a worn park bench, the evening sun casting long shadows across the grass. The park was a place of solace for him now, a space where he could reflect and find peace. As he watched children play and families picnic, his mind wandered back to the turning point in his life, the day he met Dawn. He remembered the first time he saw her, a beacon of light in his darkest hour. Her kindness had been unexpected, a stark contrast to the indifference he had grown accustomed to. She didn't just see a homeless man, she saw a human being in need of compassion. That simple act of inviting him to share a meal had changed everything. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of gratitude settle in his chest. Dawn's kindness had given him hope when he had none. It was her belief in his potential that had sparked his own. The memory of her and her daughters had stayed with him, a constant reminder that there was goodness in the world, and it was worth fighting for. As Jack's life stabilized, his interactions with others began to shift. At work, he found himself engaging more with his colleagues, sharing stories and laughs during breaks. They were no longer just faces in the crowd, they were friends. One day, after his shift, Jack was walking home when he saw a young man sitting on the sidewalk, a sign that read, "Hungry," resting against his knees. The sight brought back a flood of memories. Jack stopped, feeling a pull to help. He crouched down, meeting the man's eyes. "Hey, I've been where you are," Jack said softly. "Can I get you something to eat?" The young man looked up, surprise and wariness flickering across his face. "Really? You do that?" "Of course," Jack replied. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes." They went to a nearby diner, and Jack listened as the young man, whose name was Carlos, shared his story. It was painfully familiar. Family issues, falling into addiction, ending up on the streets. As they talked, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. Dawn's kindness had inspired him to change his life, and now he wanted to do the same for others. Jack started volunteering at local shelters, sharing his story with those who were struggling. He wanted to show them that recovery was possible, that there was a way out of the darkness. The first time he stood in front of a group, his heart pounded with nerves. "I know it's hard," he said, his voice steady. "I've been where you are, but you can get through this. There are people who care, who want to help. Don't give up." The faces in the audience varied. Some were skeptical, others hopeful, but Jack saw a spark in their eyes. He saw himself in them, the person he had been and the person he had become. After each session, people would come up to him, thanking him, sharing their own stories. It was humbling and motivating, a reminder of why he had chosen this path. One evening, after a particularly moving session at the shelter, Jack walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he was paying forward the kindness he had received. As he unlocked his door and stepped into his apartment, he paused, a thought crossing his mind. Maybe one day he would find Dawn again. He would tell her how her small act of kindness had set off a chain of events that transformed his life. But even if he never saw her again, he knew that her influence would continue to ripple through every person he helped. Jack smiled to himself, feeling a sense of peace. Dawn had given him hope, and now he was determined to pass that hope on to others. Jack sat at his desk, a mountain of textbooks and notes spread out before him. The final exams for his associate's degree loomed ahead, but he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Each page he turned was a testament to his resilience, a mark of how far he had come. The thought of graduation filled him with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. As he walked across the campus on graduation day, clad in his cap and gown, Jack couldn't help but smile. The air buzzed with anticipation, students and families milling about, celebrating this milestone. He spotted his mother in the crowd, her eyes glistening with pride. "You did it, Jack," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "I always knew you could." Jack felt a swell of emotions. This moment was not just about earning a degree, it was about reclaiming his life. When his name was called, he walked across the stage, shaking hands with the dean. The applause echoed around him, a symphony of recognition and respect. Later that evening, as he sat with his family, Jack's mind wandered to the future. "What's next?" his brother asked, looking at him with curiosity. "I want to help others," Jack replied without hesitation. "I'm thinking about a career in social work or counseling. There are so many people out there who need someone to believe in them, like Dawn believed in me." His mother nodded approvingly. "You'll be great at that, Jack. You have the heart for it." Jack knew his path wouldn't be easy. The world of social work was demanding, filled with stories of hardship and resilience. But he was determined to make a difference, to be a beacon of hope for those lost in the dark. His journey had equipped him with empathy and understanding, qualities he knew were essential in this field. In the following months, Jack threw himself into his new career. He started as a volunteer at a local shelter, counseling those who were struggling with addiction and homelessness. The work was challenging, but deeply rewarding. Each person he helped reminded him of his own journey, the battles he had fought and the victories he had won. One afternoon, while walking to the shelter, Jack noticed a young girl sitting alone on a park bench. She looked no older than 15, her clothes worn, and her eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. Jack's heart ached with familiarity. He approached her slowly, offering a gentle smile. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you okay?" She looked up, startled. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Jack sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. I was where you are once. It's tough, but it gets better. Can I buy you something to eat? The girl hesitated, then nodded. Okay, she whispered. They walked to a nearby diner, and Jack ordered them both a meal. As they ate, he listened to her story, how she had run away from an abusive home, how she was trying to survive on the streets. Jack shared parts of his own journey, the struggles and the moments of hope. I know it seems impossible right now, he said, his voice steady, but there are people who care and want to help. You're not alone. The girl, whose name was Lily, looked at him with a mix of skepticism and hope. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because someone once did it for me, Jack replied, and it changed my life. After their meal, Jack gave Lily his contact information and directed her to the shelter where he worked. Come by any time, he said. We'll help you get back on your feet. As Jack watched Lily walk away, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Dawn's act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, one that he was determined to continue. Each person he helped was a tribute to her, a testament to the power of compassion. Jack's journey was far from over. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but he faced them with a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to stay on the right path, to keep growing and learning. His life was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a story of redemption and hope. As the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow on the streets, Jack felt a sense of peace. He had come full circle, from a lost soul on the streets to a beacon of hope for others. Dawn's kindness had saved him, and now he was paying it forward, ensuring that her legacy lived on in every life he touched. And that, my friends, is Jack's story, a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the profound impact that kindness can have on a person's life. Dawn's simple act of compassion ignited a spark of hope in Jack, leading him on a journey to reclaim his life and find his way back from the darkness. If there's one thing to take away from Jack's story, it's this: never underestimate the power of kindness. A small act can change a life, and sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to make all the difference. Thank you for joining me today. If you found Jack's story as inspiring as I did, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. Let's spread the message of hope and compassion together. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories that touch the heart and soul. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Hope to see you soon.